Folks, this isn't the next one on our numerical list, but I'd like to introduce you to the fallacy that you'll see in our chapter. You'll see it listed as the false dilemma fallacy. You'll also see it sometimes called the either-or fallacy. You might also see it metaphorically called the black-white fallacy. Now, what happens in this fallacy is an arguer will present two alternatives. Thus, it's a dilemma or an either-or situation. They will say, it is either the case that P or, remember that's the word for or it's the case that R. Well, take a guess what they'll do in their next premise. They'll say, oh no, but it's not the case that P, therefore you'll have to conclude what? Therefore you'll have to conclude R. Now you might remember this deductive structure as the disjunctive syllogism. It is a valid form of deductive argument. Now, when we're looking at this as an informal fallacy, what we're going to be asked to examine is the either-or statement that has been made. The question you'll have to ask yourself is the either-or that the arguer presents a legitimate either-or? Now, there will be two ways of determining if the either-or is a legitimate either-or or not. Ask yourself one of two questions. First one is, are there other alternatives? In other words, if the person says the only alternatives are P or R, the question is, are they leaving out a possible S? If so, then we might charge the person with a false dilemma. Now, there's another strategy for challenging an either-or argument on false dilemma grounds is to challenge one side of the dilemma. In other words, if the person argues P or R, instead of suggesting another alternative that the author has avoided, what we say is, well, one of these is not even a legitimate alternative. The first strategy is what is called going between the horns of the dilemma. That's the metaphor for it, because these are like the two horns of a bull, the horns of the dilemma. This strategy is called going between the horns of the dilemma. This third one, or the second one, excuse me, is what we call taking one of the horns of the dilemma and challenging it. Now, for example, if someone says, the president ought to apply sanctions on such and such country, or the president ought to invade said country. Now, the person charging that arguer with a false dilemma might point out, well, there might be alternative means of dispute resolution that aren't addressed in the horns of this dilemma. In other words, going between the horns to say, look, this isn't a good dilemma argument, this is a false dilemma, because you have ignored other possible alternatives. Check.